Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Clark and happy to join you guys again for another edition of Leadership Conversations. This is the show where we explore the application of leadership within the world that matters to you. I'm happy to be joined by my friends and colleagues. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves in a moment. But today we're going to be talking about leading versus micromanaging. Are they the same or are they different? So to help us sort through this, we got Dr. Philip Foster, Dr. Karen Bolser, and Dr. Latanya Hughes. And before we get started with this conversation, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, and we're going to start with Philip.
I was going to let ladies go first, but okay. My name is Dr. Foster, and I'm with Maximum Change Consulting out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And my area of expertise is strategy and foresight. I do a lot of work with governments and foreign organizations, as well as domestic organizations, specifically in the area of organizational development and leadership.
Thank you. Karen?
I'm Dr. Karen Bolser, and I am with the Bolser Group Incorporated, and my, forte is executive coaching and consulting.
Awesome. And Latanya.
Good morning. I am Dr. Latanya Hughes. I specialize in leadership and leadership and organizational development. And my focus area is mainly on teaching people fundamentals.
Awesome. So let's get this conversation started. I thought it would be great to kind of take a step back. Now, we've done a couple shows together and we all care about leadership, but I thought it'd be great to take a step back and talk about the most basic thing that we know about, and that's leadership. So can we just kick off this conversation and just give a definition of what we believe leadership is? And Latanya, did you want to kick us off and then we'll kind of go around robin?
For me, my out of the box thinking about leadership is that it's a lifestyle. It's not a position. It's not a title. It's not something you do. It's who you are. It's your attitude. It's your values. It's your character. That's what leadership is. It's an embodiment of who that individual is and how they operate and the decisions that they make. So that's how I see it.
Karen or Philip?
Go on, Karen.
All right. Okay. To piggyback off of what Latanya said, I do believe that also leadership encompasses servitude. You can't be a leader without being a servant. You can't walk ahead of your people. You can walk beside them. And leadership doesn't exist without followers. And I think a lot of leaders in the 21st century believe that they hold the title of leadership, but they don't know exactly what that means. You can't be a leader and not have followers. So that's a very important component of leadership as well. Yeah,
that's great. Philip, what do you got?
So, I am probably the more senior person in this group. So I have one foot in the old school way of thinking and then one foot in the 21st century. And, my brain always wants to gravitate toward this idea that a leader is someone who pulls a team along somewhere. And actually, that's not what it is. And if you're going to compete in a new century and a new model of thinking, I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. But I want to add to it that a leader is a coach. A leader is a mentor and a modeler. A leader is all about empowering and vision casting. A leader is about showing a way to go, modeling that this is an appropriate behavior or direction, and then helping equip their followers, if you will, that are co-leaders actually in the organization to move along with them.
That's good stuff. And that's what I would add to this conversation is that leadership is the ability to influence others to accomplish a common goal, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the synopsis of what we believe it to be. And as Karen talked about, without followers, there's no one to influence. But I would also argue that there is leadership without followers, which is where we get the term self-leadership. But leadership is a wide-ranging definition. But I think that what you guys talked about kind of sets us up for the rest of this conversation. And that is, what's the difference between leadership and management? And a lot of people get that confused. A whole lot of people get that confused. So help us understand, Karen, how do we separate leadership from management?
Okay, leadership is more about grooming your people up, letting them strategically think, while management sort of dictates to individuals what they should do, how they should do it, what's the proper way, what's not the proper way. As leadership allows people different paths sometimes to get there, allowing them to make the mistakes, regrouping, rethinking, re-strategizing. So we're not about spoon feeding, if that makes sense. Leaders are not about spoon feeding. We're about letting the individual realize who they are, what avenue they should take that to get them to the goal they're trying to reach, or the organization. Where management is basically taking an individual or a group of managers' ideas and thoughts and making the people put it in a box with these boundaries, and trying to force a direction somewhat. So those are pretty much the big differences. If anybody else wants to add to that, but it doesn't allow much room for growth, or the growth can become stagnant somewhere in the process of management.
Well, I will go ahead and add that when I'm looking at the difference, I'm looking through the context of how do we lead today and into the future. And I see, again, this old school methodology. Management really, to me, is about telling, making, enforcing. Whereas leadership, at least a 21st century leader, should be about sharing, modeling, and inviting and empowering.
I agree with both of my colleagues here. Management is really all about, it's task oriented. That's how I see management. It's more task oriented, whereas leadership really gets growth and development. So where Karen was talking about, we don't necessarily handhold and spoon feed in leadership. We do more mentoring and coaching. We're looking at the long-term career and growth and development of the employee versus management. Management tends to look at who you are right now. Are you accomplishing the task at hand? They're looking at it from a perspective of think of it in relation to your performance evaluation. It's more like a checklist. Is this person performing at or above normal? That's kind of how I relate management to a performance evaluation. Doing more of a checklist. Are you doing your task? Are you fulfilling the requirements of your job? Versus leadership is looking at what are your long-term career goals? Where do you want to go, and how can I help you?
Yeah, I mean, I would throw in there, management is all about seeking order and stability. These are the people that try to keep everything in line for the sake of keeping things in line, because that's what the process dictates. And the challenge with that, if you're on this particular broadcast looking at the difference between leadership and management, is that you're not necessarily looking at the big picture when you're doing management. You're looking at kind of the linear approach of how to get from point A to point B. And regardless of what it takes to get from point A to point B, you will do what you've been told to do under the management style. Versus when you look at leadership, and we all gave our definition of it, and the process of influencing folks, you recognize as a leader that sometimes the point to get to point A to point B is not much of a straight line at all. Sometimes you have to go through a bunch of valleys and peaks. You got to go left, right. You got to zigzag, and you got to be creative to get to the next step. So it definitely is a huge difference. But I guess when you guys think back, over your career and over your current career or past career, how did you transition from becoming a manager to a leader? Because a lot of people feel that by having a title or by having a position that they are in fact the leader. And the reality is that may not be absolutely true. How did you all transition from management to leadership?
Ladies first.
Okay, I'll go first. I will say really the first thing is you have to change your mind. It's definitely a shift in how you see yourself. And then you can learn the different leadership styles along the way. But you have to first change the way you think about yourself and your position, and not allow, quote, power and authority to rule over common sense and wisdom. So for me, I know for me, I was always the youngest manager everywhere I went to work, because I went directly into management leadership from college. So a lot of my employees were significantly older than me. Some were a little bit frustrated that I was a manager over them after they had been there for so long. But when I started talking with them and really mentoring them when it came to their careers, they understood that. And one of the things they would tell me is no one ever took the time to really talk to them about their career goals and explain to them why a lot of people were coming in hired into management over them. And so once you start learning and trying, that's how I shifted my mind, because they didn't shift their mind. So it's a matter of, first of all, you have to change the way you see yourself and think about leadership or management, because they are two different things. And so I always went directly into it with the leadership mind, not knowing that's what it was, because I was always beyond just getting the task done, but really developing the people around me to be more team oriented and focused, so that everybody has a share and everyone has an opportunity to achieve what they want to achieve. So for me, I would say it's definitely
I totally agree.
shifting in the mind.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Karen?
To piggyback off what LaTanya said, I've always been the youngest manager at any job I've ever been at. So that has always been a challenge. But you know what? This really started when I was young, when I was a child. I always had this inquisitiveness, and I always wanted to know why. Someone would tell me to do something, and my question was, why? Why do we do it like this? Why do we have to? And as I got older and started to go into managerial roles, I seen a lot of managers, because they were my mentors, just saying, tell them to do this. This is what they're going to do. And they didn't allow room for questioning. So the earliest stages of my career, I was the one that was always in the office with the boss saying, why do you always question the decisions that I make? And my response to that, well, I'm not really questioning your decisions. I just want to know why. So it was a learning process for me, where some managers thought, well, she's questioning my authority. That's rude. No, it's about, why do we make the decisions we make? And why is it so bad to have a plan B or C or a different perspective? So when I think my job at the military, Fort Eustis, military is very direct. You're going to do this. You're not going to ask questions. This is what you have to do. And so that's when the training really began for me. And I started questioning, well, this is really not leadership in this little small organization, not the military as a whole, but just a small part of an organization where there's no room for growth. People don't really understand why they're doing the processes they're doing. And so with that comes along motivation. I don't have motivation to do my job because I really don't know what I'm doing. A vision. Where is the vision? How can I believe in a vision when I'm not even supposed to ask you, what is the vision and why is it the vision? And so then we get trapped in this little bubble in organizations where there's no room to grow. And then you have to start, for myself, I just started Googling other, I'm a millennial, so I'm always Googling other organizations and Google and how they direct their people and how do they motivate their team. And then a light just clicked on. I don't want to be a manager. This job is not going to be fulfilling. I want to be a leader, and I don't want to direct people all the time what to do. It's exhausting to tell people what to do all the time. Why did you hire me if you can't trust my ability to do the job at hand? You might as well do it. And so for as a millennial, there's no gratification in that. There's no purpose in that. And so that's where my training started to begin. And honestly, I had mentors who were my professors who taught me how to engage. And then I started to apply that in the position that I'm in now. So I really didn't have, per se, a coach or a mentor at any of the jobs that I previously worked at. Basically, everything that I've learned in my education and just experiences, I started to apply in my current position. And I'm still growing and I'm still learning, as you guys are. But this is a topic today that's not really applicable. I think we are the forerunners of this thing called leadership.
So
you said some good stuff.
So I want to just address some of these things because I think that my colleagues are just smart on everything. First of all, it is a mindset, and Dr. Hughes is so correct in that. We as leaders in this new millennia have got to change the way we think. We cannot run organizations with broken down old models and thinking. And so that is the mindset. And number two, coupled with that, there is a methodology, and I use mythology in its truest form, that only under a model of management will there be stability and an ability to operate. And in fact, if you're leading correctly, you will have more success than under the management model. And so, if I could address Dr. Volzer's point as well, millennials always ask the questions why. And as a leader, we have to understand that this is not questioning our authority or what we're thinking. They just want to know. It is not an affront to our leadership. They want to know because it's about a journey of knowledge for them, and knowledge and understanding. And that I want to end with that. As a leader, not only should we be growing individually, books, reading, going to conferences, doing roundtables like this, but we should be pouring that into our employees, our followers as well, and modeling learning learningship as a piece of how you're successful in that organization.
Let's dig into this a little bit more. Karen really went in on the why question. That seems to be the story of my career, of my life, my own transition, constantly asking why. And it wasn't out of disrespect. It was truly out of wanting to know what's going on. So why do some people ask why? Now, Philip, you kind of alluded to the fact that it's a millennial thing. But let's broaden that conversation. Why do some people ask why?
Well, if I could just
why do others don't?
If I could just kick that off, I don't want to cast any blame on any age group. First of all, I think that we're used to the millennials asking questions like why and how come, because my generation, the Gen X group and older, we were told this is the way it is. Shut up, sit down, do your work. And then, of course, we were pressed down with micromanagement, which is what we're here talking about. So I don't want to suggest this is just a millennial issue. I think that, quite frankly, millennials are awesome because they're bold enough to ask those questions. And I do think there's Gen Xers out there that are starting to say, hey, we really like this millennial way of thinking. Now, I count myself in that field most of the time, although sometimes I still scratch my head and say I don't get it either. But my point is, I don't think it's just a millennial issue. I just think they have the boldness that we didn't have.
Okay. Why do we ask the question why? Why do some people ask the question why?
I think one of the reasons, personally, I think one of the reasons people ask why is just general natural curiosity and inquisitive. Some people are just genuinely inquisitive. There was a season in my life where that's how I was, even as a child. There, some children, I particularly see this in nieces and nephews, they always ask the why. Everything is why. They go through a whole period in their life where there's why, or they'll say, how come? It's just genuine, natural, human inquisitiveness, wanting to know more. And rather than embrace it, sometimes we just shrug it off like, I don't want to keep answering that question. But we should be really nurturing that, because understanding and knowledge is what we need in order to make informed decisions. And that's how we are shaped as people. So I think that for me, the why people ask why has everything to do with people really wanting to get to the root or the heart of some things, so they can make informed decisions. And it's a part of growth and development. So that's what I think. the reason behind why people ask the question of why. It's a genuine inquisitiveness. It's human nature to want to find out or get to the root of it. Now, there are seasons where we get past that and we can start digging for information. I mean, we're in the age of Google. I tell people all the time, there's no reason to not know. We live in the age of Google. You can just on your phone, internet, and find out whatever it is you're looking for. And I might not be credible, so you have to do a little bit more digging, but you can get the answers that you need a lot easier than it used to be in years past. So I think also with information being so readily available at the fingertips, that also causes people to want to know even more.
So let me ask this question, Latanya, because I think you bring up a great point. Is it a fair statement to say that leaders ask why and managers just do? Or is that
Correct.
too broad of a net to cast?
I don't think so. Because some managers, I mean, if you think about your own career, I know me personally, I've never had any managers who asked me why I did what I did or wanted what I wanted, versus those who mentored me, those who were the leaders who mentored me because they cared enough to want to know, where am I going? Where do I want to go? And they were the ones who cared enough to ask questions and probe. So I'll give you a perfect example. When I transitioned from college into management and leadership, there was a difference between where I was in Atlanta from where I was in North Carolina. I was mentored in both places by different people, but when I was in Atlanta, it was definitely everybody dug deep. Every manager I encountered, everyone there dug deep. Why did you choose us? Why? It was always a question. When I got to North Carolina, it wasn't the case. My direct manager, he did not care. It wasn't until I transferred from that location to a smaller property where that general manager mentored me, and she sat me down and she cared about everything, not just my career, but she wanted to know, where am I going personally? What are my financial goals? What is this? What is that? Why? Why do I want these things? And I don't think it was so much to get in my business, so to speak, but it was to get an understanding, but also to raise awareness within myself.
And that's a good point. That's a good point.
And you to thinking as a person,
because questioning why brings you out of the place of complacency. When you're a manager and you don't let your people question you sometimes, and this is the difference. Questioning doesn't mean that you have to back down on your decision. Questioning allows room for them to strategically think in yourself, is this the best direction to go? When you limit your members of organization from asking questions, you stagnate their growth. Does that make sense? And so you're giving them direction of what to do without allowing them to ask questions. So therefore, you're limiting ideas, you're limiting strategies, you're not mentoring, and you're not grooming. All you're doing is spoon feeding people information and how you want them to do a job that might not necessarily be the right way to conduct a plan. So questioning is not about authority. We have to think of questioning as allowing someone to strategically think. And Latanya, you hit it right on the nail. During interviews now, the tables are kind of turned. They're not wanting to know, everything so much about, let me rephrase this. They want to know more about, why are you choosing us? Why are we so interested, or why are you so interested in working for our organization? They want to see your thought process. Is this long-term? Is this short-term? Where are your goals from now? Are you going to hinder or help our organization? They're trying to find out more about you, and instead of, trying to shape the way they do business to see if you're going to be a fit for them. Does that make sense? Are they going to, the goals that you have, is this organization going to allow you to reach some of those goals? Because if your goal and vision is totally different from the organization's, they know right then and there, well, we're not going to be able to help her reach A, B, C, D, E, and F. When I hire my staff as a millennial, I want to know, where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself? And if my organization can't help aid you in that, I don't want you working for us. Not because I don't want you, it's because I want you to reach the vision and goal that you've set for yourself. And so by hiring someone that doesn't have that same strategic alliance, I'm hurting them in the long run. And not only am I hurting them, I'm hurting the company as well. And so managers need to get out of this mindset, and some old school thinking leaders need to get out of this mindset of, you can't ask questions. I'm in charge. I have the title Dr. Bolser. I have the title Dr. Hughes, that I run this. I'm the game. I'm the show. That's not going to work, because you're going to see yourself in the pit. You're going to see yourself in a pit. So we have to change the direction we're taking leadership. We have to change the direction we're allowing people to think. And we honestly have to groom up people, because after us is our children and the generation behind us. So what example are we setting for them by spoon feeding them everything? And I think that's happening a lot in public school systems today, and even private school systems, is that we are telling these children it's not okay to question. It's not okay to come up with different ideas. We're telling you to do this, and this is the way you should do this math problem, or this is the way you should figure out this science equation, instead of letting them think, okay, maybe there's a different route to get to the same answer.
Yep, I totally agree. I think, one of the things I've learned in the past couple of years is learning to step back and not trying to answer the question for people. I'm sure you all can relate to this, where you've had friends and family where you were eager to share, give advice, give perspective, help them figure this out because you already know the answer. And the reality is, what happens when you do that, they lose opportunity to be thoughtful for themselves. They lose opportunity to be strategic for themselves. And then you, whether it's, incurred by yourself or not, you are viewed as kind of the go-to person for all things regarding that topic. And unfortunately, what happens when that occurs is that your identity becomes wrapped up in being the answer man or the answer woman. The moment people start to realize they can think for themselves, your identity becomes in question and you have an identity crisis. And as we kind of talk about leadership, the idea behind leadership is to spur thought, is to spur creativity, is to spur consciousness of what one is feeling or thinking on their own, so they can figure out how this interacts or applies to this situation. The idea of management is more prescriptive. Mm-hmm. It's more telling the story of what should be done or how it should be done. But I think this is a great segue into the main topic that we're talking about, and that is micromanaging. What is micromanaging and why people should be aware of micromanaging? Philip, did you want to start us off there?
Sure. To me, micromanaging is this idea of pointing someone in a direction, saying, here are the 10,000 steps you have to take. And oh, by the way, I'm going to check in with you every few minutes. It's this idea of a covering, if you will. And, there's no questioning allowed. There's really, many times there's no modeling, mentoring, coaching, anything like that. It's more telling through directive. To me, micromanaging is about policy and process rather than people. And so, we have a real dichotomy going on there. It's the unknown black and white next to the minutia of reality of the world. We're so different. I think that we're, I love that song that I've heard on the radio, that we're a Technicolor world. We're Technicolor thinkers. Micromanaging is not about you having your own say or your own ideas. It's about just, here's the direction we're going, point in that direction and go.
Yep. Karen, did you have any thoughts about micromanagement?
I think micromanaging can be very detrimental too. I know I've had tons of bosses who micromanage, and it would cause me my stress level would be high. I was always anxious. There's 50 emails in my box. Don't forget. Oh, let me send you a calendar reminder that you don't forget due on Monday. And it's like, wow, to the employee, I must really suck at time management, or he doesn't trust me enough to get this done. And you know what? Micromanaging isn't so much about not trusting that your employee's not going to get it done. I think it has some self-awareness. You don't trust yourself that you can make great strategic decisions, or you make the best choice in an employee. So I believe that a lot of micromanaging tells us about the person who is doing the micromanaging. And that person might need to be groomed a little more, develop some leadership skills, and maybe figure out who they are as a person. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but usually when I meet micromanagers, they're unaware of themselves. They're not sure about their decisions. They're not sure about their time processes or even managing their time that well. A lot of micromanagers, they don't manage their time. So I think that's a key indicator when you have a manager who is a micromanager, that they need a little bit of development themselves. It's funny how that works.
Wow. Latanya, can you dig into that a little bit more? Karen mentioned that micromanagers are self-conscious. They may be struggling with the very thing that they manage in other people. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit more?
Sure. It's just like she said, micromanaging really says more about you, the person who's doing the micromanaging, than anyone else. So what's your confidence level in your leadership? And some people micromanage out of fear, and others do it out of a power struggle. So it's more about power and authority and exercising it. And most of the time I see it in a negative way. Micromanaging is unhealthy. It's unhealthy for you. It's unhealthy for the employee. It's unhealthy for the organization as a whole, because what are you really doing? It stifles productivity. It stifles creativity and innovation. It really is a drain. It sucks the life out of what you're trying to accomplish. So when it comes to micromanaging, you really have to look at yourself. And this is where organizations really should look at their leadership, their supervisors, their managers, and really give them some training and possibly some counseling to figure out, why do you feel like you have to micromanage? I really do. I really believe that there's something we really need to get a better handle on when it comes to mental health.
Right.
Mental health means crazy. But in truth, there's so much to mental health. We need to see our mental health the same way we do our physical bodies. We exercise our physical bodies. Why don't we exercise our minds? So sometimes, I don't care if it's going to acupuncture, I don't care if it's therapy, but it's somehow we need to get to the root of, why are you micromanaging? Why is there this level of distrust? Because I know some people will say, I don't trust anybody to do anything. I may as well do it myself. And then that's a lot of stress and pressure to put on yourself. So it goes back to what Karen said about, well, do you even trust your employee? But now let's question, why don't you trust the employee? If you hired them, then what's wrong with you as the person who hired this employee that you don't trust them? So what's your trust factor, and why is there such distrust, and why do you feel like you need to be the center of it all and really get to the root of it? So I think a lot of micromanaging really has to get down to the root of the person doing the micromanaging, like Karen said, but really let's get into the mental health of the person and see why they are the way they are. So it goes back to what we talked about earlier, is why. Why ask why? Why not?
And I think too, when we talk about micromanaging as well, it all stems back down to, it's okay to make mistakes. And what I see a lot in micromanagers and just managers in general is that there's this fear of, I might make a mistake. But mistakes are what grooms us. Their mistakes and bad decisions are what tells us, okay, this direction wasn't right. Let me strategically think, what went wrong? What can I change in the process to fix it? So with my team, I welcome mistakes. I even send out emails to my team saying, you will be disappointed in me. I will make mistakes. There are things that I will not do right as an academic dean, but be gracious to me. And when we do make mistakes, let's sit down as a team together and figure out which direction we should go. Now, I'm not saying that leadership is all a democracy. There's sometimes in leadership where decisions are going to have to be made, and you're just going to have to run with it, because then you can get into the issue of everybody's a manager, everybody's a leader. And so that can cause chaos. But what I'm saying is there's a good amount of decision making in every organization that should be done by a team. And it boils down to accountability as well. And, you know, as us being Christians, we always want accountability. You never want to make a rash decision by yourself. And that's where you can bring in your team. Then they can know that, hey, the lines of communication are open. Dr. Boser is never going to tell me my idea. She might not agree with it, but there's always going to be room for open communication. Same for my team. They're allowed to tell me what they like, what they don't like. It never turns into a griping session. But, hey, I don't know about this decision. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's try it. And if it doesn't work, let's try something else that you brought up in the conversation. But we have to allow ourselves to make mistakes. I believe that micromanagers don't allow themselves to make mistakes. Therefore, they put all the pressure on their people not to make mistakes because they don't know who they are, and they believe that their team is a reflection of them, which can be true. However, we all have fallacies. We're all going to make mistakes. And so micromanagers tend to want to be perfectionists because you're right, LaTanya, it's that mental health. Something happened in the past where they need the applause from somebody else, or someone really dug into them for making a bad mistake and not allowing grace. And I believe that micromanagers put their past experiences on their team members and treat their team members the way they were treated when they made a mistake. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so let's kind of spin this on the other side for the people that are micromanagers. Philip, are there any pros to being a micromanager? Because we clearly heard the cons.
You know, this goes against everything in my being to talk about pros of micromanaging because it's not who I am. Read my books, you know that's not who I am. However, I would say that, you know, there are times and places where micromanagement might be appropriate. And you know, I'm digging deep here, but I'm thinking about organizations like NASA, where someone's life is on the line if they get it wrong. You know, check, recheck. But here's the thing: even in that context, we're talking about, you know, entrusting people to do their job, and then it's your job just to check and recheck. So in that sense, I might be okay with micromanagement. I might be okay if, you know, we have a multi-billion-dollar contract on the line and we just want to make sure we're doing it right. I might be okay with micromanagement. In a day-to-day sense, I am not okay with micromanagement.
But is it really the task of micromanaging, or is it the leader's task to make sure that you train your people right to do the task at hand? So, because if you want to check up, for instance, the whole NASA situation, yes, people's lives are at stake, big project going on. But there's stuff you can implement, such as checklists and deadlines. Okay, on February 29th, this is due. I'll be checking in. 2 weeks from now, on March 23rd, I don't know, I'll be checking in. So is it so much about micromanaging to meet a deadline, or is it micromanaging because you don't trust the skill set of your individuals? And I think the lines can be blurred sometimes because I think that if you want to ensure that a big project gets done, and I'm the same way when I get stuff from corporate and that needs to be done, and I'm trusting the deans of each of my departments to make sure it's done, we set out a schedule. I'm not going to send you an email every day because you're going to get overwhelmed and you're not going to like me. And I'm not going to like myself, and I'm going to be stressed out. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to set timeline dates.
I think that
timeline date that we can restructure. So if March 29th you don't have the first goal done, then we can do some restructuring together to figure out how we can get there.
And first of all, please forgive me for talking over you. I think that is in a sense where the lines become blurred between micromanagement and accountability. Okay. now here, my mindset is, if you've set me on a task to go do something and I'm working diligently on it and I'm checking in periodically and saying, hey, here's my milestones, here's where I'm at, but you are checking in on me more than that, I would feel micromanaged. So I think that sometimes micromanagement is, kind of a mental model, if you will. But I want to go back to something that both you, Dr. Bolzer and Dr. Hughes mentioned, and it's the trust factor. And I come from an era where micromanaging is really about covering up your own lack of self-worth, covering up your own fears, or your own ability to do something or understand. I think that where you're coming from, Dr. Bolzer, when you're talking about going to your staff and saying, listen, I'm not perfect and I'm going to make mistakes. And in fact, we're all here together as a team. That's what makes us. We are introducing this idea that leaders are not perfect. And see, that takes us away from that micromanagement need, because now we're saying, oh, I already know I'm not perfect. I don't have to cover anything up. So right. The psychology side of that is powerful. But it's okay to make mistakes as long as we appropriately are held accountable for those mistakes in a natural way.
Yeah, and that's such a fascinating idea that leaders are not perfect. And it takes a lot of pressure off of me running a whole university that my staff knows I will make mistakes. I already put that out there. So when I do make a mistake, you can't say, well, look what she did. She thought she was perfect, because I already told you mistakes will happen. Mm-hmm. And I love my staff because they can come to me and say, Dr. Bolzer, you forgot to do this, because leaders forget things too. We don't meet deadlines either. Weird, huh?
and our guest, Monty Henry, who's typing in on the live chat, said that some people like the power associated with telling others what to do. And I agree with that. There's sometimes a power struggle that goes on. But I think that still goes back to that self-worth feeling. When you're fighting for power, it means you don't feel you have power. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong in that. What do you think, Dr. Hughes?
I've been writing down some really good notes. You guys had a great discussion going. At the end of the day, for me, it boils down to transparency. Sometimes the greater the transparency, it's easier to be held accountable. Like what you were talking about. When Karen, you and Karen were talking, I wrote down some things. Think about miners when they're down in those caves mining. How dangerous is that? Lives are at stake. So does micromanaging help or hinder the process? I think there are pros and cons to it, because you want to make sure someone doesn't make a mistake with a machine and hurt themselves and someone else and cause a cave-in. But on the other hand, some people might be so nervous with you breathing down their neck that it causes them to make that same mistake that you're trying to avoid. So it boils down to, you have to have a healthy balance. Accountability and micromanaging. So it goes back to what you were saying about the lines between the two being blurred. So I think it's important to, you can set those deadlines. I just finished working on a project while I'm in the middle of working on the project for a peer-reviewed book, and we had deadlines where we had to submit our articles for, so that we can make the deadline for the publication. We didn't get 90,000 emails in between the time that we got the timeline. You know when it's due. You put it on your schedule. You have to manage your time. It goes back to our very first lab where we talked about managing your schedule and your time and time. Put it on your calendar and hold yourself accountable. So that's important. But I really do think that it boils down to transparency. But it also goes back to what we talked about with mental health. Why are you so paranoid? Why are you so concerned or afraid to make mistakes? You know what I mean? Like, what is the root of why people are the way they are? And I really think that that's part of why people micromanage, why we're seeing such an increase. This power struggle thing, it still boils down to what's in your mind that has you thinking that you've got to exercise your power and authority to lead from a place of fear. I do not believe in
leadership.
Micromanaging.
What was the last part? I'm sorry.
Of leading by way of fear.
which is
can I just say one more thing real quick?
no, I was saying that
as a person who's interested in history, I like to learn from mistakes of others in the past. And if you just humor me here as I dig way back into American history a little bit, and we look at how micromanagement can be detrimental. When we were dealing with the Revolutionary War here in the U.S., we had the Minutemen and we had the Redcoats. Okay, the Redcoats were very hierarchy-driven. They all had to line up a certain way. They had certain commands they had to give. They had to shoot a certain way at a certain time upon command. That's micromanagement. The Minutemen, and the reason why I argue we actually won the war is because we took on the greatest army at the time, was that the Minutemen were allowed to disperse. They were allowed to make their own decisions. They were entrusted by their leaders to make those decisions. And sometimes they lived, sometimes they died. But the point is that they were able to take on a powerful organization, which was the British Army at that time. And it was just one person taking on 30 people, and they won. So that's the difference between micromanaging and empowering someone.
So my question would be, okay, so we know the pros and cons of micromanaging, not micromanaging. We know the differences between a proactive service type of leader and a manager. Where do we go from here? What steps do we need to take in the 21st century organizations to groom our managers? Because we want to groom managers to become leaders. And what steps can leaders take to implement in their organizations for those that are under them to groom them up to lead? So where do we go from here? How do we make that change? What are the first steps? And one of the first steps I believe, I'll just name the first step that I believe is important, is to build trust and relationships among the people you work with. And when I say that, that doesn't necessarily have to be a work-related conversation. I know that when I first stepped into the role of the dean, I took each of my staff members out individually, and we talked about what's your favorite movie, what's your favorite kind of music, try to build some type of relationship. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends, but as human beings, we connect on different levels, whether it's culturally, spiritually, through ideologies, through different acclimates. We connect as human beings. And so at first we need to establish a relationship. You cannot lead people effectively without there's being some type of bond there. I don't care if it's over a movie. I don't care if it's both of you liking tulips. There has to be something that's established there. So that is the first step I take when I come into an organization, is not to implement change, not to put in new policies and procedures, but get to know the people that I'm working with. And then that's up to you to figure out how much time that will take. Once you do that, you need to make sure they know each other. They're working together in groups. You spend more time at work than you do with your own families. They are like yours. It might be a dysfunctional family, but they're like a section, another family. So you have to make sure that your team has good relationships as well. Remember, I'm not saying they have to be best friends. I'm not saying they have to hang out on the weekends or call each other, but there needs to be a mutual respect and trust among your employees. And it's up to you to determine that culture as a leader. So when I look at my organization and the university that I oversee, that's up to me to set that culture. They're looking at me. And if I allow disgruntledness, separation, I'm the one to blame. So we need to nip that in the butt as managers and as leaders, and realize that we are responsible for the culture in that place. And when something is out of whack in that culture, we need to think of different strategies, whether it's, I know for my team, we have breakfast of champions every month. Take the team out, we have breakfast, tell them what they did well, give out some awards. It's up to us to think of strategies to build that kind of culture. So any of you have input on how to implement team building and a culture of leadership within your organization?
Yeah. Well, if I could contribute to that question, Karen, in terms of first steps of transitioning from a micromanagement style to a leadership style, I think you kind of hit it on the head. And I was going to say, what you were talking about in terms of setting dates and due dates and whatnot. One of the things I was going to say is that one I learned from our professors at Region is that they are not going to micromanage anybody. They are minimalist specialists. They will keep it to a minimum. But when you think about their tactics and why they do that is because they don't got time to babysit you if you're at the doctoral level or the master's level. The idea is that you've chosen to pursue this degree and this education pathway. And if you're going to go down this path, here are the parameters up front, which is one of the things I would say is the first steps of transitioning from a micromanager to a leader. Set clear parameters. Now, Karen, my interpretation of what you talked about in terms of setting due dates and deliverables is a form or exactly project management. Those are project management principles where you set clear parameters up front. Here are the deliverables. Here are the due dates. Here are the owners. It's nothing wrong with doing that. But where it gets dicey and sticky is when you want to give the parameters and you want to watch people execute the tasks under the parameters. You want to be alongside them. You want to make sure that they're cutting this widget correctly. You want to make sure that they're hitting the print button the right way. You want to make sure that they're capitalizing all their T's and dotting their I's. That's where micromanagement becomes a problem for most people. They want to give out the work and they want to watch you do the work. Then they want to take back the work if they feel like you're not doing the work the way they would do the work. The second thing I would say in terms of the first steps of transitioning is respecting the skills of your colleagues and your team members. One of the things I value so much, and I've learned this over my career and of course over my academic experience, is that the skill sets people bring are assets. And I've learned the hard way, especially going through the doctoral process, is that I don't know everything. And I have to admit, I don't know everything. And because my information or my knowledge is so finite, based upon the context of the conversation, I am willing to own what I do know, and I'm willing to own how much I don't know. And if I don't know this much, then I have to be reliant upon my team members and respect what they do know. When I hire folks for different projects, when I bring people on board for a team project, I don't necessarily hire just for personality. I think that's a part of it. I select people based upon strong skill sets that will add tremendous value that I cannot add. I am not the best. Just for instance, I'm going through a design process for my company. I am not the best graphic artist. I am not the best marketing person. I am not the best designer. I am not the best editor. I am not the best a lot of things. What I do know is leadership. What I do know is strategy. And I've committed myself to focus just on content development and allow the team to do all the other things that will make the company great. And I think that was my third point too, just being honest about your shortcomings. Like, be clear that I don't know how to do this. And and I'm sorry, I'm just talking so much, but when people are given tasks from you as a micromanager, you're trying to become a leader, you have to allow them to perform their work and not necessarily not be critical, but allow them to educate you as to why they've decided to do something the way they've done it. I'm working with a brand specialist, and I'm not the best brand person. I am a very boring artistic person. I'm very linear. I pick the same things all the time. And Latanya, I've talked with you about this. And every time my brand specialist comes back with an idea, I'm going back to why. Why are you doing this? And I'm not asking this because I'm trying to figure out, how to do her job, because I'm paying her to do her job, but I'm asking because I want to understand her thinking. I'm asking because I would not have made that decision. I'm asking because I want to trust you. And as I understand your thinking and how you're interpreting what I'm giving you from an information standpoint, I can better support you and rely upon you.
Well, if I could just add to that, we were taught as doctoral students and now doctors that it's okay to say, I don't know. I mean, I think I remember them saying that day one when I was sitting in a room of, 400 people, and they said, look around, only 70 of you are going to be here at the end. And it's okay to say you don't know. And by the way, I think we were right about there anyhow, but hire the right people, continual learning, coach and model correct behaviors, empower, trust. Got to change your mindset. Stop saying we've never done it that way or it's never worked that way. And above all, what we're seeing in the new organizations of this century, of this millennial rather, is set expectations. What are we here for? Why are we here? What are the questions we should be asking? Are we asking the right questions? Set those expectations and just let your people go to do their job.
Mm.
I think that's great. One of the things that while you were talking, William, was the team is the sum total of the parts. At the end of the day, everybody in the organization, whether it boils down to the department level, from, you have the organization as a whole, then you have every department within the organization, and even within the departments, there are teams or groups within those. So there's always sub teams. And what I will say is, at the end of the day, it's all the success and or failure boils down to the sum total of the parts. But how do you use those parts? Because, okay, think about the human body. The human body is at its optimum when the sum total of the parts are all working the way they're supposed to, they're allowed to function. If you think about it, the lungs are not trying to tell the heart how to function, because the lungs don't know anything about the heart. The heart is not trying to tell the brain what it's supposed to do. Why? Because the heart is not the brain. Now, are they all connected? Yes, the heart sends signals to the brain sends signals throughout the body, but every single part is functioning in their own place. So it's like, okay, the heart is staying in its lane, the lungs are staying in its lane. Why can't we as people kind of get that analogy and realize that when it comes to teams, when it comes to leading, managing, it's all about the effectiveness of, are we allowing the sum total of the parts, everybody in the team, to bring their supply? If someone is not bringing their supply, then we need to ask the question, why? Why aren't you bringing your supply? Get to the root of it. What's going on with them? Is it something personal in their lives that's causing them to not be able to be their best and be excellent, put their best foot forward? Are they here to collect a check? Let's get to the root of why. If there's any part of the team that's not bringing their supply, they may feel like you're micromanaging when you're really not micromanaging. It just may be something within them that they see it that way, and maybe some people like. And then there are some people who like a lot of autonomy. There are people who don't like group projects, and I am one of those people. I do not like group projects. Why? Because it gets on my nerves when folks don't meet the deadline. When folks don't do what they're supposed to do, that bothers me, because now somebody else has to pick up that slack. Does that make me a bad person? No, that just means that I know that I don't like group projects, so I don't put myself in a position of group projects. But anytime I've had to do a group project, I do my part. That's where you have to have a good leader facilitating the group, because again, you're managing multicultural and a diverse group. So when we start talking about diversity, like Karen said earlier, how do you know how are you managing and leading diversity even with this? There's so much more to this conversation that we really haven't had an opportunity to deal with, especially with I see our time is coming to a close, but there's so much when it comes to dealing with teams, managing and leading, whether it's because we might see it as micromanaging, whereas another culture might see it as a norm. So some people might micromanage because culturally that's the norm. So they don't see that their micromanaging is stifling creativity and innovation because this is normal for them. Whereas it's just like bribes. In some cultures, bribes are not bad. Biblically, bribes were not bad. It was a way of commerce. It was a rate of exchange. Whereas here in the U.S., a bribe what? It's a bad thing. So then we start having to deal with what's the cultural dynamics of the group and why people do what they do. So it goes back to why, digging deep. And as a leader, what is your responsibility to come about to understand? Like Karen said, you got to open up that dialogue and see who is in your group. Why do they think the way they think? It could very well be something as simple as culture. And I say simple as culture because once you get to the root of it, then you can start exploring options of how to best lead rather than managing. Because at the end of the day, who has time to sit here and handhold people because you're not helping them grow? It's just like a parent who's going to hold a 5-year, your child is 5-year-old and you're still breastfeeding. There's something wrong with that picture. That's going to look crazy. But if you think about it, how many parents go through life, an 18-year-old, they're still holding their hand and they're making their decisions. At 25, they can't make a decision. This is what micromanaging is. I know this is crazy, but this is what micromanaging is.
Well, if you did not know what micromanaging is or was, you just got the most clear answer possible. They say time flies when you're having fun. So our time has come to an end. However,
after you finish, I just want to give 4 takeaway points.
Karen, I see you. You want to say something?
After you finish, I just want to give 4 takeaway points to the people.
Say it again.
Okay, I'm just going to give 4 quick takeaway points.
Well, go ahead and give the 4 takeaway points, and then I'll give this last piece.
Leaders and change the dynamic of your organization. First, build trust. Build trust among your team. Learn how to trust yourself and build a culture of relationships. Bottom line is, we're humans. We were created for relationships. I hate group projects as much as anybody else, but there's no way we can function as a society without working with human beings. That's why God created us. We have to learn how to work together. Second is build a culture of mentoring, not just traditional mentoring, but reverse mentoring as well.
Yep.
Here, people who are completely different. Compare people in different cultures, in different backgrounds, in different age groups. Iron sharpens iron, so we have to learn why people think the way they do. The only way that you can do that is be with someone who thinks differently than you do. Third, build a culture of feedback. Constructive criticism is necessary. That's how we grow. If we're told we're doing something perfect all the time, how are we growing? Give them positive, constructive, and negative feedback sometimes. We're not perfect. Okay, once you give them feedback, develop goals and milestones. Check in periodically. As the leader, what are you going to do to change the negative behavior of your people? That's your responsibility. You can't give them an employee evaluation and tell them they suck at doing Excel spreadsheets if you don't provide the resources for them to learn and train. That you cannot ding somebody for that. I hate performance appraisals because what managers do is they tell the person what they do wrong, but they provide nothing for them to change that behavior. That's the manager's and the leader's responsibility. After you do that, take your people, let them train, provide training, provide resources, let them out of the office, make time for them to grow. Also, the last thing is that you as a leader and a manager need feedback too. So give out surveys. Don't let them write their names on it. Let them tell you how they think you're doing, what areas you need to improve on. If you're a leader and you haven't gotten any feedback or you're a manager, let me tell you, you're probably stagnant in your growth and you probably need room to improve as well. Again, so those are things that you should implement in your organization. Those are things that are going to build a dynamic team and culture within your organization. And in the 21st century, you can look at organizations and you can look at politics today. If something doesn't change about the way we're leading people, it is going to get worse. So this is a critical and pivotal time in history. I believe that the Lord is gathering up people to make that change, and we are the forerunners for leadership. But we are at a pivotal time where there needs to be this discussion and there needs to be questioning. It's okay to question. So encourage your people to question. Allow them to question and question yourself. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? And at the end, are these things that we're going to do getting us to our goal?
So here's the last thing. Karen, thank you so much. I wanted to give you guys a chance to provide any shameless plugs on projects you're working on, and then we're done.
I am actually working on a co-author peer-reviewed book that will be out, I believe in June. It is a book on values and ethics, learning from biblical characters. So I had a great time getting deep into Samson, and my perspective was God's benevolence in the midst of destructive behavior. So even when you're not what you're supposed to be doing as a leader, and when his point was as a judge, God is still benevolent, he's kind, and at the same time, his purposes for your life will still come to fruition.
Awesome.
That's what I'm working on right now. Oh, and I have a book signing in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on the 26th of this month.
Awesome.
So I'll have some more details from that bookstore. It's from 11 to 1, so I'm still working out the details. So pretty excited about that. So if you're in Myrtle Beach, come and see me. I'll be posting some information.
Of course, we're working on a project together.
Cool.
I'll let you go more
Karen?
into that. But the second thing I'm working on is I just released a book in December 29th called The Christian Millennial Leading in a Secular World. I'm working on another book now. It is called Forgiveness, Healing, and Restoration of Leadership. So hopefully maybe in a year that will be completed and finished. But new things and working with you guys, trying to build a platform of leadership, which I think it's going to skyrocket. So I'm excited about these things.
Well, I've got several things going on in the chat box there. I put an article that I just had published through opensource.com. For those who are following the open source side of things, Jim Whitehurst, who is the CEO of Red Hat, wrote a book that also was called The Open Organization. And I've actually collaborated with them, which is really cool. So they allow me to publish my work on their platform. So there's some cross-pollination in the true open sense. I'm currently in the process of writing my next book that's an outcrop of the open organization. And right now I'm working on a couple of projects that may take me to South Africa, Egypt, and beyond. So more on that as it happens.
I'm coming.
And I put a link to my book in the chat box as well.
I was going to say the same thing. Well, awesome. For me, Karen and I are working on an article about African-American women, their leadership and their communication styles. I'm also working on a series of mini books on leadership and strategy. These are quick read books that you can purchase and download and access to learn more about leadership within the context of nonprofits and churches. I thank you all for being a part of this panel. It's been a great discussion. I know we all got to go, but thank you, the audience. Thank you, Monty, who's been very active in the chat room, for being a part of this. And we will see you guys in a couple of weeks for the next leadership conversations. See everybody. Bye.